Hello, everyone. We're going to start our next session, and our next guest, of course, needs no introduction. He's the President Designate of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB. He's a former chairman of China's Sovereign Wealth Fund, CIC. Mr. Jin is also the former Vice Minister of Finance in China and former Vice President of AIIB. Apart from his distinguished career in China's public sector, he has also been deeply engaged in international economic affairs, working in bilateral and multilateral forums like APEC, ASEAN Plus 30, and G20. Fluent in English and French, known as a skilled troubleshooter who, I'm told, loves his coffee. And I'm also told he likes to quote Shakespeare. Mr. Jin, can I invite you now onto the podium to say a few words?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed my great pleasure and honor to be here at the 2015 Singapore Summit. Much has been written about the AIIB in recent months, and I welcome the opportunity today to share with you some details on the bank's mission, rationale, and overarching principles that will underpin these operations. I would also like to touch on some of the questions that have been posed about how AIIB will operate, including how we envisage the bank will engage and cooperate with other multilateral development institutions. First, about the genesis of AIIB. Over the past 10 months, we have been working towards realizing the vision of a new multilateral financial platform to help Asia develop and improve its infrastructure. The genesis for the AIIB stems from the recognition of the importance of infrastructure to the development of Asia and the need for significant additional long-term financing for infrastructure in this region. President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Keqiang announced the AIIB initiative during their visits to Southeast Asia in October 2013, envisaging a bank designed to promote interconnectivity and economic integration in this region, which would cooperate with existing multilateral development institutions. In October 2014, representatives from 22 countries signed a memorandum of understanding to establish the AIIB, and Beijing was selected to host its headquarters. In November 2014, during a meeting in Kunming, China, a forum known as the Chief Negotiators Meeting, the CNM, was established. The CNM is comprised of one chief negotiator from each of the bank's prospective founding member countries, who are empowered to oversee the bank's establishment process, including its charter and policy framework. A small multilateral interim secretariat was also established to provide the policy, technical, logistical, and other support required for the bank's establishment. And I have been managing the secretariat during its formative phase. So it seems that there's a question: why should we have a new bank? This question has been repeatedly raised throughout the whole process. Asia's infrastructure needs are massive, and available pool of multilateral and bilateral financing resources fall way short of need and demand. The AIIB has estimated that before 2020, the demand for infrastructure investment in the Asian region could reach up to $730 billion per year. Given the magnitude of these figures, the funds needed to support regional demand vastly exceed the capacity of the existing multilateral institutions. With its establishment, the AIIB platform will maximize the aggregate financial resources available to the Asian region from the international community. Creating AIIB has never been about challenging existing institutions. The world stage is spacious enough to allow many actors to perform. AIIB would differ from other multilateral platforms. As a new development institution, AIIB has a fresh slate to design a new platform for the new century. The Bretton Woods institutions, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, were created 7 decades ago. And the AIIB is set to celebrate its 50th anniversary next year. The existing multilateral development banks are hugely important, contributing substantially over the years to global and regional economic and social development. They have a strong track record and are continuing to achieve remarkable results over time. Their successes have fostered growth and development, reduced poverty, and have helped to shape the Asian region as we know it today. However, they were designed to meet different needs in different times against different historical backgrounds. As they have evolved over time, they have also faced challenges in meeting the needs of their members who are faced with new circumstances. Consequently, each of these institutions has embarked on its own change and reform processes to adapt to changing market conditions and emerging challenges. AIIB's founding members have worked together with concerted efforts to creating a streamlined, results and outcomes-focused organization that is built on the principles of transparency, openness, independence, and accountability. The bank's shareholders want to make sure that the bank's governance, organization, and policy framework benefit from the lessons and reform efforts of the existing MDBs and incorporate global best practices. In creating this new institution, we are designing systems, policies, and procedures to enhance efficiency, to promote cost-effectiveness, and achieve measurable results that would meet present-day needs. Its shareholders will ensure that appropriate oversight mechanism would be in place and would be rigorously implemented. This intensive shareholder involvement in the bank's establishment process provides a deep and durable foundation for its enhanced development effectiveness. Together, the bank's founding members are working to make AIIB a model, a lean, clean, and green organization. AIIB will be a good and reliable partner, not a competitor. AIIB will complement and supplement the programs of the existing MDBs. We will learn from each other. We are already in contact and working closely with these institutions. The World Bank, IMF, AIIB, EBRD, AIIB, and others in the private sector and think tank communities have been and continue to be very generous in sharing their knowledge and lessons of experience with us. Once AIIB is up and running, there will be much more room for on-the-ground cooperation with MDBs, including co-financing. AIIB also looks forward to be working very closely with private sector partners. There has been much attention on how the bank will tackle social and environmental impacts and risks. AIIB is committed to the principles of sustainable development in the concept, design, and implementation of its investment policies and activities. Our experts working in the Secretariat are renowned experts in the areas of environmental protection and social framework. They are now working to perfect the policies, and they have had rounds of consultations with the member countries, NGOs, and civil societies. Good governance is key to success. Let me assure you that AIIB will be a good global citizen. Its ultimate success and credibility will depend on its ability to enact sound governance policies, practices, and mechanisms, and to ensure the effective implementation. The bank is following a comprehensive approach to ensure that it operates with integrity, transparency, and accountability. We will put in place policies and oversight mechanisms to promote integrity in the conduct and performance of management, staff, and the board. And we will take steps to prevent and redress any fraud and corruption in operational or corporate activities. I say a few words about my vision. I was selected as President Designate at the 6th Chief Negotiators meeting in Tbilisi, Georgia, last month. Looking to the future, I have set 2 overarching priorities. First, to develop and embody a principles and ethics-based corporate culture that is focused on meaningful and measurable outcomes and results. Secondly, to deliver financing services customized to its client needs. I'm committed to ensure that AIIB offers pragmatic, practical approaches and solutions, efficient services, and cutting-edge knowledge to its clients. We will ensure that AIIB's financial support is technically, financially, economically, environmentally, and socially sustainable. All these elements are crucial for us to build a state-of-the-art, innovative, and agile financing platform tailored to meet Asia's infrastructure financing needs for today and, more importantly, for tomorrow. AIIB holds great promise to measurably improve the lives and livelihoods of Asian people. With the support of our shareholders, the private sector, and other stakeholders, we will do our best to achieve this objective. So let me thank you for this opportunity to share with you details on how the bank is developing, and I would be very pleased to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jin. I would now like to invite the floor to submit any questions they would like to ask. I have a couple of my own that I will kick off with, but I will continue to monitor the flow coming from the floor so that I can pose the questions for you. Please do send them to, if you sending them via the Summit app, email to singaporesummit@gmail.com, or you can use the mic. So Mr. Jin, let me start off with you first. Your biggest challenge with AIIB is to strike a delicate balance between Eastern and Western member states. Can you clarify for us, and I know this is very sensitive, that the bank is not simply a tool to promote China's interests?
You see, AIIB is initiated by the Chinese leader, Xi Jinping. So you can say rightly that this is a China-initiated bank. And based on the GDP of Chinese economy, China is the major shareholder. But this does not mean this is China's bank. The bank is not owned and managed, operated by China. It's the bank which is owned by all of the 57 founding members and future members. The management team would be professionals recruited on the basis of meritocracy. The bank would cover all of the emerging market countries in Asia. Whether these countries are on the road to one belt, one road or not, we want to cover all of the developing countries in Asia. And we also expect this bank's achievements in infrastructure investment would have positive spillovers on the other regions as well.
Still, some countries like Manila are staying cautious. They've postponed signing up as they want to see your governance structure. Sounds great on paper, but exactly how will AIIB be structured?
You know, when the Articles Agreement was agreed here in Singapore on May the 24th, the deadline for the signing of the Articles Agreement is the end of December of this year. So I'm sorry to challenge you, postponement is not the right word. Because from the 29th of June all the way to the 31st of December. This is a period of time for the signing. Any country which signs is not a country which is delayed its signing ceremony. But let me also assure you that we understand fully different governments have their different priorities and different schedules. Some countries may be moving faster, sometimes later. We would like to see they can complete the whole process before the end of this year. And I'm sure all the 57 countries would do that.
So when it comes to Manila, you're confident they will sign by the year end?
I just talked to the Minister of Finance of the Philippines.
And what did he say?
We will try to do it, get it done. I said, if you miss the bus, you will lose your status of founding members. And he said, no, we will have it.
So he gave you his word?
He said, yes, I'm pretty sure.
What exactly are the terms of your loans? I know this is a fresh platform which you talked about. There are concerns out there in the market that the standards for your loans will be much lower. Example, less demand for transparency, less demand to stick to environmental laws, less demand to require deregulation, free market policies. Are these concerns justified?
You see, when the Chinese leaders initiated the idea, I think I understand that there are lots of skeptics. They say China will be doing this bank. Are they going to go by international best practice? Are they following the rules? Are they taking care of the environmental protection and taking care of the people who will be displaced by the infrastructure investment? So, we understand that it takes time for us to convince them that China is very much committed to create a multilateral development institution which would meet the highest possible standard. If there are doubts and questions, you have to be patient. So our idea is, throughout the whole process of preparing the memorandum of understanding and the Articles Agreement, we try to work in such a way that all of the prospective founding members are fully involved. We are very, very much attentive to their views, so that more and more countries are coming. When the European countries started to join before the end of March, you see, very interesting. Some people say, well, these countries are joining because they want to reshape the governance of this bank. That's wrong. They came because throughout the whole process of 1.5 years, they were convinced that we, China, and all of the 22 prospective founding members have been working in a very democratic manner. And they've been working together to create such a kind of bank. So they were persuaded that this China-initiated bank will be the first-class multilateral development institution with a 21st century governance. That is why they wanted to join. They decided to join. So it's a vote of confidence on China's initiative of having such a bank. So I have said on many occasions, I value, I cherish this kind of trust. And we will live up to the expectations of all of the founding members and the future members. And we will not abuse this vote of confidence.
Let's talk more about this trust. Can I go back to the point I made earlier? How rigorous will be your standards for an issue like deregulation, free market policies?
Certainly, we are not a charity. We are going to work on the basis, the commercial basis, okay? And it should be a market approach. And we will be contributing to the infrastructure development by working with other MDBs, with private sector, particularly private sector companies. I think they are playing a bigger and bigger role. First of all, when you want to have such a bank, I think it's very much important for you to have the governance structure. Now, in designing the governance structure, we engage the first-class experts who have experience working in the World Bank, AIIB, EBRD, AIIB, and I personally contributing to this whole process, giving my experience in the World Bank in ADB. I was on the board of the World Bank. I was in the managed team of ADB. I also was with the Sovereign Wealth Funds, and I was chairman of the CICT, a private company in China. So we've been working together. So the first requirement is whether you could have a first-class governance structure. And secondly, how to implement. If you can rigorously implement the governance structure, there should be no problem for the sustainable development of this institution. And as I said, we will remain open, transparent, and we would have the whole world keeping their eyes on us. We say, I propose this bank should be lean, clean, and green. The whole world knows about this. So there is a huge issue of credibility. And I can assure you, we would mean what we say.
The launch of AIIB also comes at a time when it's also getting increasingly competitive in this space. We know that Japan, for instance, has provided a $110 billion loan for Asian infrastructure projects. You don't think you're a little bit late?
No. You know, actually, when AIIB was initiated, and when this idea was kicked off, there was such a great interest, I think, in infrastructure, renewed interest in infrastructure. And it's welcome to see so many countries, private sector companies, they would be thinking about how can they improve this. This is very good, actually.
How many members do you ultimately want to have in this bank?
As many as your reach of imagination permits.
Give me a number. Give this audience a number.
We have 57 countries, and to my knowledge, this is very much confidential, more than 20 countries are on the waiting list. So that makes it more than 70. And I'm sure there will be more countries which will be interested.
Do you think you can eventually win over the US and Japan?
Why do you say win over? Why do you use this term? Because from day one, we welcome all of the countries in this world to join us. It takes longer for some countries to reach their internal consensus and making their decision. And we understand it takes longer, sometimes, for some of the countries for various reasons. We've been very much patient. And as you know, the door keeps open to all of the countries. And if they make a decision, just to pick up the phone, make a call, and we can handle the rest of business.
They have your direct number?
Of course, of course.
How patient are you with the US?
China is remarkable for its patience with its 5,000 years of history. But please understand, we're also moving very fast. Patience does not mean procrastination. Patience does not mean you are dragging your foot. Patience means you should allow people to have a thorough review of your ideas. And you should allow them to make their decisions anytime, whereas we should be moving fast, financing the infrastructure in Asia. So actually we can move on parallel. One group of countries will be founding members, they will be putting money, and we will be financing the projects. Some other countries will be thinking, watching, waiting. Each and everyone will have a great time.
Do you think the US is dragging their foot?
No, I didn't say that. Why did you always, use the words which seems to be very inappropriate? I'm sorry to say that. US would be making decisions. But you see, I've been talking to the US government. I was in the White House twice, with the State Department twice, Treasury once, and I've been meeting people when they come. It's same true of the Japanese.
So what's holding them back if you've been talking to them?
Bigger country has the bigger problems to deal with. You should be more patient. Right?
We know that AIIB, of course, is slated to begin operations next year. What infrastructure project will you kick off with first?
You see, probably I will take advantage of this opportunity to tell you what's our business. we cover infrastructure. If you look at the Articles Agreement, we say AIIB's mandate is to finance infrastructure and other productive sectors. Infrastructure could be energy, right? Pipeline is infrastructure, power generation, power transmission distribution, ports, seaports, airports, telecommunication, and urban development, water supply, water treatment, waste treatment, logistics, rural infrastructure, rural electrification. So we say infrastructure and other productive sectors. So some people asked me, what do you mean by other productive sectors? And I said, other productive sectors means other productive sectors. So,
can you be a bit more specific?
In the future, now we would be worried over, we would be working on the physical connectivity, right? It's very much important. However, when you build railways, roads, linking the countries together, what if there's no harmonization of custom policies? You know, the train or bus will stop at the border. Nothing's going to happen. So you need to harmonize the policies. This is, in my view, policy infrastructure, social infrastructure. And also, you see, human resources is the most important factor for development. Maybe in the future we can finance social infrastructure, such as health, education. And I would say environmental protection could be a stand-alone infrastructure. You see, if you do things like that, you can cover a wide range of areas. So we do not want to confine ourselves to a very limited number of sectors. We try to leave room for maneuver in the future. Indeed, the mandate should never ever be designed in such a way that you will have to amend Articles Agreement very soon. I remember, for instance, EBRD. My old friend Jean Lemire is here. When EBRD was founded, the mandate was very narrow to finance the transition from the former command economy to market economy. And 15 years later, mission completed. To my knowledge, the shareholders were thinking about shutting it down. But how can you shut down a bank which has been doing wonderfully well? How can you shut down an institution which can do a lot of things? So the solution is not to shut it down, but to revise the mandate, to expand its business. So EBRD has been developing, and the EBRD has been working with us, to co-finance. So we do not want to limit ourselves to a very narrow range of infrastructure.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think the demand would emerge as we move forward.
So what exactly will your first project look like? Give us a clue. Where will it be?
Now, my idea is, first we have to have a scan for the possible pipeline. I want to be cost effective. I'm not going to recruit all of the experts sitting in the offices waiting for jobs to be done, to do. No, that's not the approach. So I'm recruiting about 20 or so experts. They would be reaching out to the potential borrowers, and then we would take a look at the proposed projects. If we have more power projects, we start to recruit power experts first. If we have more road projects, we would recruit road experts, and then we would expand. Okay, so we do not want to spread ourselves very thin early in the stage. We want to focus on certain areas and be cost effective. So maybe in the first batch of projects, I cannot tell you the first project. The first batch of projects could likely be power and road projects.
I have a couple of questions from the floor, some burning questions, and they're coming through the iPad as we speak. Suddenly they just flourished as you were speaking. One of them, what is the level of risk and of return that the AIIB will be willing to pursue?
This is a multilateral development institution owned by the sovereign governments. In this regard, we should not have too much of a risk appetite. If I were dealing with the private sector companies, I would probably be taking more risks. But just because ours is a multilateral development institution, so excessive risk-taking should be avoided. However, without risks, you cannot get returns. So we should strike a proper balance between the sovereign guaranteed projects and private sector companies' projects. So we need to achieve reasonable returns. Reasonable.
What is reasonable?
Reasonable is reasonable. If you look at the public sector, public utilities, public services, normally if you can achieve 7, 8, or 9, or 10, that's very good. And actually, if you could have a steady cash flow of 6 or 7% of the return, I think is very good. Also, the return depends on the policy of the governments. Sure. Some of the countries could allow for a little bit higher profit margin for the public works. Some other countries, because of the concern of the affordability, probably they would push down the water tariff, power tariff, or tolls. Their return might be lower. So I think it depends on the actual situations of the countries we work with. But definitely, I would say in the range of 6 to 10, it will be reasonable, in my view.
6 to 10, okay.
That's good enough, actually.
That's reasonable.
That's reasonable.
In terms of legal jurisdiction, I mean, when you go to different markets, obviously you're facing with different legal jurisdiction. And this is a question from the floor, of course. How would the AIIB deal with the differences in terms of legal jurisdiction, access various countries, potential risks with delays driven by various factors, including, but not limited to political changes, creditor protection framework, where the AIIB will be funding infrastructure? I mean, these are all specific jurisdiction legal issues.
AIIB is an apolitical multilateral development institution. We will finance projects based on economic and financial considerations. Okay, this is the key. However, we need to look at the political and economic stability when you put your money in a particular country. Because we have to be accountable to all of the shareholders in spite of our sympathy for the urgency of developing infrastructure projects. As a multilateral development institution, we certainly have our rules to follow. I don't think there will be huge problems if we will work in a number of countries with different legal systems, because as you see, the World Bank and other multilateral development institutions have no problem working in all these countries. So what we ask for, actually, is the consistent policies to be adopted by the government. This is the most important. We can depend on our professionals to make judgments about the commercial risks. You look at the trend of the sector, you look at the viability of a particular project. But what is most difficult to deal with is probably the uncertainty in the policies. Give you one example. When I was the vice president of AIIB, I financed a project in Afghanistan. When we decided to finance this project, there was such a concern on the board because they thought it was very, very risky. And then I raised the 3 points in response. If there are any AIIB people on the board, they should remember what I said. First, if AIIB is not there, who else? Secondly, any project is risky. Even in developed countries, some projects would fail. Third, I'm willing to take a loss in this particular project, but I'm not going to erode the capital base of AIIB I will cover the loss by the profits I made in China and some other countries. Please support me. So the board gave me the benefit of doubt. The project was approved. The telecommunication of Afghanistan turned out to be a smashing success. You know, even Taliban wanted the telecommunication. Okay? But some people in the government were crazy. They wanted to nationalize this project because it's so lucrative. So we were very much worried. Luckily, this is an international institution, not a private sector company. So I reached out to President's office, President Karzai's office, and told him, this is crazy. You are killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. You are actually driving away the financial resources at the very time you need these capital inflows to support your economic reconstruction. And the President Karzai called this off. You see? So this kind of policy change would be a disaster if it is allowed to happen. So when we work with all of these countries, whatever your legal system, it's fine as long as you would honor the policies or agreement we have reached.
Okay. So those 3 principles that you talked about with Afghanistan, would you apply the same 3 principles as far as AIIB is concerned? Would you be willing to take a loss on a project if the project warranted it, if it was important enough to you?
If you want to do something in this world, I mean commercial activities, losses are inevitable. Why? Otherwise, you don't have to have loss provisions. And if you don't take risks, as I said, you may not do something which is really worthwhile. But overall, the bank must be profitable. Overall. Sometimes it happens because of external shocks, and otherwise good project would be in trouble. So given the experience of the IFC, for instance, or EBRD, AIIB, you have to deal with some of these issues. But overall, if you have a strong program, you can handle that. And particularly, I want to highlight the point. We need to support private sector development in very low-income countries. You should not bypass them. You know it's risky, but you have to step in to perform your international responsibility. As long as we follow the proper procedure, as we do things correctly, we do not think it should be a big problem if we suffer some of the losses.
Earlier you mentioned you will be working with some private sector companies. There is a question from the floor which I thought was very interesting. If the US doesn't join, will US companies be at a disadvantage in bidding for projects funded by AIIB? Would you penalize them?
I'm sorry, you have not read my Articles of Agreement. The Articles of Agreement indicates the bank practices universal procurement and universal recruitment. Any company of any country can participate in the international competitive bidding. We do not prejudice against any companies in this world. American companies, Japanese companies are welcome to participate because we believe this is conducive to high-quality implementation at a low cost. Recruitments, we welcome the nationals of all the countries join AIIB. We don't look at your passport. We look at your track record. And indeed, when the International Interim Secretariat was set up on October the 22nd, 2014, the priority for me is to hire a lawyer, the chief counsel, to prepare the Articles of Agreement. And I gave the 22 countries 2 weeks to nominate candidates to me. At the end of 2 weeks, no nomination. Then I told them, if you don't do, I have a perfect candidate. Then I announced, very interesting, some people were surprised because I nominated a lady, an American lady, a lawyer working for us. So this actually is very much positive. It tells the whole world we are inclusive. Indeed, I have quite a number of Americans working in the interim secretariat, and I said, I also have the CVs on my desk, Japanese, Canadians, and some other kind of countries which are not members of this bank yet.
There are many private sector companies here in this hall who will be willing to work with you. Any advice you could give them?
No, I don't have advice to give them. I need to have advice from you. I think only by learning from you, learning from good experience, could this bank be a great institution.
Lots of comparisons between AIIB, ADB, and World Bank. You think you can be more successful?
I will be humble enough not to say that, but I will do my best to learn from them, and if we can do a little bit better in certain respects, I will say this is a credit to all these existing MDBs.
A little bit better or a lot better?
I don't think you can be better than anybody else in every respect. You can at most be better in certain respects. You should be humble enough to recognize that.
So finally, you think the US will eventually cave in the end and join you?
They are most welcome.
Mr. Tim, thank you so much.
I'm sorry.